It's exactly 4 in Radio Cairo. This is World of Info. We're coming live from Studio 3 in Maspero, and my name is Dr. Amr MABROUK, and Dua Muhammad is at the control, and we are with you until 5 p.m. today, so stay tuned with us. Today is the World of Info, and as usual, we always try to bring to you some information and some knowledge. And today is a mixture between the world of books and the world of info, because today we are going to speak about the mother of the world, or should we call it with its real name, Cairo. In our last episode, we talked about Cairo through the eyes of Dr. Ayman Fuad Said, the professor of history from the Faculty of Arts, who has written a beautiful, colorful book about Cairo, its topography and its urban evolution. And this is a very universal book. It's more encyclopedic, talking about the prospect of building and founding Cairo as the capital of Egypt. And as I promised you last time, that we are not going to dedicate only one episode to talk about this beautiful book, but we're going to give in more information by dedicating another episode about Cairo. And so today we are talking purely about Cairo. So still tuned to World of Info with me and Dr. Amr MABROUK, and we are going to talk about Cairo. Last time we brought you more information about why Cairo has been chosen to be the capital of Egypt, and why it's not really as old. Its date does not just go to 969 when Mu'izz al-Din Allah decided to make Cairo, build a capital and make it the capital of his new sultanate or the new caliphate site, after he occupied Egypt through the forces of the Fatimid forces that were led by his general Gawhar al-Saqali, or Gawhar the Sicilian. So Cairo is actually is at the apex of Delta, and it is the same capital that we have talked about that has been always a very strategic important point, the point of bifurcation of the river Nile into the apex of the Delta, where the Nile is divided into 2 rivers or 2 branches, its terminal branches, Rosetta and Dumyata. And Rosetta is the western one, Dumyata is the eastern one. So at this apex, the pharaohs have decided to make the old capital of Egypt, Memphis. And even after the capital of Egypt has been transferred to Thebes during the modern kingdom, after being built by, chosen to be by King Ahmose, the one who was able to kick out the Hyksos. So from the 18th dynasty onward, the capital of Egypt was Thebes, but yet still Memphis maintained its importance as a university, as a place for worship, and as a place for a capital, the old capital of Egypt. And after Alexander the Great came in 332 and decided to make a new capital for Egypt as a sort of a cosmopolitan city overlooking the Mediterranean, near to his original country and near to Athens, and overlooking the Mediterranean, when he has chosen Alexandria to be the capital. When Amr ibn al-As came to Egypt, he decided that the same area of Memphis, which still maintained its importance strategically and tactically, even during the Roman time, when the Romans decided to make Alexandria also the capital of the state of Egypt, which belonged to the Byzantine Empire, yet the remnants of Memphis and what is known as the Babylon has been the site, or a strategic important point at the site of the apex of the Delta, and this was a famous garrison and a famous castle at that area. Why is it important? Because it is a naturally protected place. It lies at the bifurcation, as I said, so it has its tactical and strategic importance. But the most important thing and the most important step is that it is well protected from the east by the Muqattam Hill and from the west by the river Nile itself. And so this area is a well environmentally protected area and a strategic point as a sort of the division of the 2 branches. So when Amr ibn al-As came, he decided not to take the capital of Alexandria to be the capital of his new invaded city, or invaded country, Egypt, which belonged now to the Khalif Umar ibn al-Khattab. He decided that he is going to choose or build his new capital at near the Babylonian garrison or the Babylonian fortress. Why? Because first of all, he couldn't reach the Alexandria was not yet clarified to kick out the Byzantine. It took him 6 months to get rid of the Byzantines in this period of time. And the second point is that he found that this is a very well-established area that can give the protection to his forces, and it is very near to Umar ibn al-Khattab. And Umar ibn al-Khattab said to his general Amr ibn al-As, always make between you and me no river or no water. And yes, was possible at that time for any armed forces or a messenger to come from Al-Medina, where Umar ibn al-Khattab was, through a horse or a camel, all through the route, because there was no Suez Canal, and it will go to the eastern border of the river. If they go to Alexandria, it's the capital, then any messenger has to cross the river and has to cross even the Rosetta or the Domyata in order to both of them if he wants to reach Alexandria with a message. So Amr ibn al-As decided to build his fustat or his camp at this area in Babylon. We have discussed that last time. And we have reached the point of why Cairo was chosen, because Cairo was a military city. It's a city that was built by people who are the Fatimids, who are invaders, who although they are Muslims or they were Muslims, but yet they were Shiite, completely different than the sect of the Sunni that were the rest of the Egyptian population. So they kept the capital. They kept the city of Fustat to be the trade city. The city where its port carries the importance of carrying all the merchandise coming from the south of Egypt, and also any merchandise that comes through the Red Sea would penetrate and reach the River Nile and then go to the River Nile itself and to reach the Fustat as the main port of the capital. When he decided to build the capital forwards, he built it north to the Fustat. As we have mentioned last time, we have the remnants of Al-Askar, that was the north of Al-Fustat, and then Qata'a, which was the Tulunid capital, which was destroyed by the Abbasid, and the forces were returned to Al-Askar, which is south of Qata'a and north of Fustat. So they decided to build a capital north to all that, and this is the capital of Cairo, which was a military city, a forbidden city that had only inside the palaces of the Khalif and the general's quarters and the army quarters and a big mosque. And this mosque, the original mosque, which was built by Al-Aziz Billah, the son of Al-Mu'izz al-Din, whose son Al-Hakim Amr, finished this mosque, and it gave it to his name, which is Al-Hakim Amr Mosque. And of course there was another big mosque, which is Al-Azhar Mosque, just to the south of Al-Hakim Amr, about 2 kilometers away from it. So we have talked about this forbidden city, the city that nobody was allowed in except if he has a license to go in, or it is the city of the army, a city of the political junta, or a city of the political elite, the aristocrats, the Khalif and every one of his proteges are living inside the walls, and the walls are well protected. And later on, even during the demolishing state of the Khalifs in the first 100 years, and after the complete decay of their authority, the Khalifa Al-Hakim the Khalif at that time, he brought in the minister Badr al-Din Gamali, who was an Armenian commander in the Syria and Mesopotamia, and he brought this guy to control and to build and to protect and renovate and to introduce a kiss of life to the decaying Fatimid dynasty and the Fatimid rule. And Badr Gamali was the one who also built walls, renovated the gates, and improved the service and maintained the security and the safety of Cairo, but yet he maintained the city to be an isolated military city. So what happened when Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi came almost 60 or 70 years after the disappearance of Badr Gamali and his son, who were the consecutive ministers? Let's talk about what happened when Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi came in as a minister of the last Khalif al-Adid, as a Sunni minister for the first time for the Shiite Khalif, and how he has changed the face of Cairo from an excluded, isolated military city into a totally different city, or a city that is approaching to what we know today about Cairo. So stay tuned with us. We're talking about Cairo in the world of info. So we're still talking about Cairo, and we have talked that Al-Adid, during his last days as a Khalif of the Fatimids, not knowing that it will be the end of the Fatimid dynasty with his death, he decided to bring in Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi to be his minister. And the minister is usually the right hand of the Khalif, and in the last 100 years of the Fatimid Caliphate, he was the one who was controlling everything. We know that Shawar and Durgham had great problems, and they had the fight between them, and in the end the Adid decided that he is going to take Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi to be his minister. Salah ad-Din was a Sunni, and of course he hated the Shiite, and he hated their understanding, or the wrong understanding of the Islam, especially the Ismaili sect, and he decided to blow up this Caliphate, and he made his revolt, or what we can call a real small short mutiny, which ended up with the destruction of the Fatimid dynasty completely, and he started his own dynasty, or the Ayyubid dynasty. These times were very critical time, because the Crusaders were on the verge of invading Egypt, and even Shawar himself, the famous minister, has used the Crusaders in order to establish himself against Durgham. And of course, during all these different and difficult periods, we can find that Salah ad-Din came out to reform, and at the same time, with the end of the Fatimid dynasty, with the death of its last Khalif, that is Al-Adid, Salah ad-Din became officially and on the ground the most important and influential person and the governor of Egypt. From the very start, Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi looked with great despise on the Fatimids, and he decided to open up Cairo. The first decision he made after using his aide-de-camp, the famous Baha'u'ddin Qarakosh, in order to be his deputy in Egypt, he decided that he is going to build the citadel. And in order to, knowing his military might and his military understanding and military intelligence, he decided that in order to protect Cairo as the capital of Egypt, it has to be completely renovated. And the first thing is that to make a stronghold, or a garrison, or a citadel on top of the hill mountain, and this citadel was the Salah ad-Din citadel, that Salah ad-Din decided to make it to be his place of governors. Although that the fact that Salah ad-Din died before staying in the citadel of the mountain, or Qalat al-Jabal as we call it, or Salah ad-Din citadel, yet it always maintained his name. And it was the place from which Egypt was ruled from the time of Sultan al-Adil, that is the brother of Sultan Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, until recently, until the last of Khedive Ismail, when he decided to transfer the place, or the official place of the governor or of the ruler of Egypt, to Abdin Palace. So when we talk about this critical period, we have to know that Salah ad-Din decided that he's going to build walls, not only surrounding Cairo, but extending always even to the south towards Al-Fustat. So we have to understand that there was the Fustat, that was the capital of Egypt, or the old capital of Egypt during the Islamic dynasty. There was Cairo, and there was nothing in between, but there were the remnants of the Qata'a and the remnants of Al-Askar, and these were the south of Cairo. In the year 1168, just before Salah ad-Din became the minister, Fustat had a terrible burning out of its catastrophic burn, which was inflicted by some of the the turmoil that happened during these times with the fight between Shawar and Durgham, the two other ministers, and of course from the fear of the rush of the Crusaders to invade Fustat, and therefore Fustat has been burned out, partially or even half of it has been burned out in this incident of 1168, and it ended up by the fact that it never regained its full economic power or the full richness of it, and it stayed as a commercial capital, but it didn't stay or didn't take the chance to be a real capital of Egypt. And as we advance in history, we'll find how all these areas have been amalgamated together to form the whole city of Cairo that we know today. So when Salah ad-Din came in and decided that he's going to transfer the site of the ruling of Egypt to the citadel, at the same moment he decided that the palaces, of course the Eastern Palace, which was a huge palace by the Caliphate and built by the famous Caliph, the Mu'izz al-Din Allah, and later on undergone a lot of renovations and building up all this beautiful palace. Salah ad-Din decided to not to take it as his own palace, and started by giving part of it and starting demolishing the remnants of the palace, or this was the Eastern Palace or the Western Palace during the Fatimid period, and gradually by time the areas has started to be invaded by Egyptians coming to live inside the forbidden military capital and starting their own trade and their own business and their own important places and their important aristocrats. They started to live in and around the remnants of the Eastern and the Western palace, which by gradually lost its strength as a big one palace, being divided into small sectors built at that time with small palaces and small, if we can use the word, villas by important people during Salah ad-Din time and by important merchants and commercial people. All this started to change the face of Cairo from a forbidden city into a city of importance, a capital of the country, but at the same time a city that has different taste than the Fatimid city, a city that has important people living it, and people who are of great importance and related to the Sultan or the governor, but they also have to be near to the citadel. And if they want to be near to the citadel where the Sultan is or the governor of Egypt is, they will start going south to Zuwayla Gate and start renovating these areas and start building up their own palaces in the way and their houses in the south of the Zuwayla Gate. So here we find the transfer of power and the transfer of authority from the Eastern Palace and the Western Palace inside Cairo into the citadel. And therefore the ministers, the generals, are starting to build up their houses and their homes and their important places near to the citadel, so that they have an access to easily can go to the Sultan and meet him. And this way they started going south from the Zuwayla Gate, and there was sort of urbanization of these neglected areas, which were reaching even the premises of the Ptolemaic capital, that is Al-Qata'a, and of course of Al-Askar, as we go towards south, towards the citadel. So this is the first of the junction in between the city of Cairo and the rest of the rest of the capital, or the remnants of the capital and the roots of the city. So whether the expansion is going south or the expansion is going north, we are going to discuss that in details to see how the city has metamorphosed. Although the Sultan has always decided to build his palace and to govern from the citadel, as was the instructions given by Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, we can see the last of the Ayyubid dynasty in Egypt, that is Salah ibn ad-Din, when he decided that he is going to build his palace in Manyal al-Roda, or the famous island that has the caliber of the Nile, and he built a beautiful palace, a beautiful mosque, and even the quarters and the camp of his own Mamluks, who he brought at a very young age to give them a proper education and a proper military education and religious and language education to become professional soldiers of fortune who had great loyalty to the Sultan Salih Najmuddin Ayyub. And we have talked about that last time, of how these youngsters and how these young officers and soldiers have changed the face of Egypt and changed the fate of Egypt. So after the break, we'll talk about how the Mamluks reached power and how they have changed the face of Cairo. So this we find the Ayyubids. The Ayyubids have decided, Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi and his followers from the same family, from the same dynasty, decided to make Cairo as a capital, but yet it's not going to be the center of governance, and the center of governance will be in the citadel. So the aides and the aide-de-camp of the Sultan have decided to go south towards the citadel to build their homes and their places and their palaces quite near to the Sultan so that they can reach the citadel very easily. By deserting or by leaving the Cairo, the capital, and the fact that the army and the barracks have been transferred to the citadel made the city available for commercial business and to have also the place of aristocrats who are not directly related to the everyday day-to-day business of the Sultan. So the aristocrats and the business people and the commercial business started to go to Cairo and build in it their houses and their trade places, and their started Cairo to be a trade center. So this is the first point. The second point, as we have talked about the Mamluks and how they controlled Egypt after the death of Salih Najmuddin Ayyub, when the first Mamluk Sultan was Shajarat al-Durr, followed by Izz-ad-Din Aybak, and then followed by Saifuddin Qutuz, and the great army warrior and the great general and the great Sultan Zahir Baybars, and after that Qalawun. When we talk about this period, we'll find out that these people decided to take up or to renovate Cairo. Salih Najmuddin Ayyub decided to build his school and his mosque and his place of judgment, or the judgment house, in the area which is now on the side of Khan al-Khalili, which was on the remnants of the eastern palace of the Fatimid Eastern Palace. And when Salih Najmuddin decided to build his dome and his place of barrier in this area and his school, and what is the school? The school is a very important educational center that has been or has started as early as the 10th century or the 11th century, where the Sunnis decided to build schools for teaching the different sectors of Islam and the theological schools of Islam. We know, of course, the Shafi'i, the Hanafi, the Maliki, and Hanbal. All of these, especially, were the important schools of education. So Salih Najmuddin decided to build his first school, which was not the first school in this area, because Salah ad-Din Ayyubi built a school that we haven't reached us nowadays, because the fact it was destroyed in some time before. But Salih Najmuddin Ayyub school is still there, and its dome, where the barrier of the Sultan is there, is still there, and also it was the place for the judgment, or the judgment house, where the supreme judges stayed in this judgment house to take control of the judgment and in the undergoing the hand of justice. So Salih Najmuddin built his palace built his dome and his school on this area, and to be followed by his Mamluks. The Mamluks, who felt that they are entitled and they are loyal to Salih Najmuddin Ayyub, decided to build their own great palaces quite near to the palace of their masters. So we find Zahir Baybars building his school and his small mosque beside the place and the school of Salih Najmuddin Ayyub. Across the street, in what was known as the Western Palace, Sultan Qalawun, who was also a protege and also a Mamluk of Salih Najmuddin Ayyub, decided to build his complex on the other side of Salih Najmuddin Ayyub dome and school. So as we see on the both sides of the famous street of Shara of Mu'izz al-Din La Street, what's known now as the Mu'izz al-Din La Street, the main street of Cairo, we can see people, important and influential people, building their mosques, their schools in the route of Mu'izz al-Din La Street. And beside them we can always see great builders, like for example we have the great builder Nasser Muhammad ibn Qalawun, who in his third reign of Egypt, which went on for 30 years almost, from 1313 or 1314 till the year he died in 1343, he was a great builder, he was a great innovator, and he was a great cleaning up sultan, and he also instructed his ministers and his princes, all of them, to be strong builders in the whole of Cairo, doing urbanization of Cairo, of what we call the Great Mamluk of Cairo. So as we can see, Cairo is becoming great. So when Ibn Khaldun came in the end of the 14th century to visit Egypt, and he stayed in Egypt until his death in 1406, we can say that he has seen that Egypt, or Cairo in particular, he said, I came to the mother of the world, the place of education. And he was astonished with the number of schools that are built all around Cairo, the number of sabils that were built around Cairo, and the number of hammams or public baths that were built around Cairo. All these are carrying how important it was, the city of Cairo as the capital of the great Mamluk Sultanate, and how it became an important show of power and show of money and show of experience, how Cairo is starting to get renovated, to get more beautiful, with its beautiful mosques and its beautiful schools, its beautiful places of worship, its places khankas and the Sufit khankas, and always we can see the expansion southwards towards the famous site of south to the gate Zuwela, and north, north to what we call now the Husseiniya and the area of Al Husseiniya, north of the gate of Nasr and Futuh. But Egypt or Cairo didn't see always great days, because we had the famous plague of 1349, and in this great catastrophic plague a lot of people lost their lives. The people lost their money and lost their lives and lost everything. And of course with the plague there was a period of decline, and there was a period of decline of the number of the population and decline in fortunes. But even in that dark times we can find Sultan Hassan, the son of Nasser Muhammad ibn Qalawun, building his magnificent and his beautiful mosque and school. So we can see the hammams, you can see the policy of the schools, and we can see the policy of the Sabil Kuttab. After the invasion of Egypt by the Ottomans, and the loss of the state of Egypt as a sultanate and as a kingdom, and it's becoming as a sort of a satellite state that belongs to Istanbul or belongs to the Ottoman Sultan, yet we can see that Egypt or Cairo has seen some great builders, and has seen deviation in the amount of buildings and how they are built. We haven't seen much of the beautiful grand mosques that we have seen during the Mamluk period of building, but we have seen some beautiful mosques built of them. About 4 or 5 reached us to the day of today, built on the Turkish style, and the rest of the other 16 smaller mosques built on the style of the Mamluks. But we also can see the fact that the famous Sabil Kuttab, that 60 or 70% of the Sabil Kuttabs that do exist nowadays in Egypt or in Cairo belong to the Ottoman period. Why is that? Because it's cheaper to build a Sabil Kutab than build a mosque, and the Sabil Kutab is very important in a desert city like Egypt to apply to make water available for the people to drink for free. It's a good deed. And at the same time, on the second floor of this Sabil Kutab is a beautiful irrigated school that teaches the young children the rules of arithmetic and the language and the Quran, helping in removing of the illiteracy and making people more literate and understanding and helping in the process of education. So we see different kind of Cairo during the Ottoman period, and we see great builders at the time of the Ottomans, even in spite of the fact that they were invaders and that they were occupiers. But we still can see a person like Abdurrahman Kadkhuda, who has dedicated his life and has dedicated his authority not only to build himself important, beautiful structures like his beautiful Sabil Kutab in Mu'izz al-Din last street, but also to make restorations of a lot of the beautiful mosques of Cairo and the other places of worship. So we talk now about Cairo during the Ottoman period and during the Mamluk period, but what happened with the invasion of Napoleon Bonaparte to Cairo, and what has he seen, he and his forces, as they occupied Egypt, a city of the Orient. So stay with us tuned. We're talking about Cairo and its own history. So we're talking about Cairo, and we're talking about on the day that Napoleon Bonaparte visited or invaded Egypt, and he went to Cairo and saw what he could never believe. It's a beautiful city. It's an oriental city. It's part from the 1000 Nights and One, and yet it was different than any city that he has ever seen. And at the same time, the fact that everything was so close to each other and that there were a lot of routes that were so narrow made his generals and made Napoleon Bonaparte, who was a very sensitive military man, and he was very concerned on the fact that his army could completely dissolve in the streets of Cairo if there is a mutiny inside, and if they try to end up this mutiny, they will be trapped inside the small streets and the narrow streets of Cairo. So after Napoleon Bonaparte took up the palace of Muhammad al-Alfi at the Asbakiya for him to be the house of his choice over his leadership, he decided that he has to open up and to improve Cairo military-wise. He started making renovations of the gates of Cairo, taking it as the barracks of his armed forces, especially in the Bab al-Nasr and Bab al-Futuh, or the Nasr and Futuh gates, where we can see French names given written and inscribed on the walls of these two towers very clearly. And also we can see that his chief engineer, military engineer Sanson, decided gave him a plan that he wants to completely demolish a lot of buildings, destroy almost 6 mosques, 100, almost 200 buildings, and to make the routes of Cairo easily accessible through destruction and straightening up and widening these streets. Time was not on his side, and it was not on the side of Mino and of Kleber, of course, but we can see that they have made some renovations to the famous port of Cairo, which is Bulaq, because it is the main port that receives all its trade coming from Alexandria through the river Nile, and it was also on the western or the Bulaq island, which is now, strange enough, it is called, of course, Zamalek or Gezira, and he made on its northern aspect a quarantine section, which is now where there you can find the famous restaurant areas in these places in the northern part or the northern tip of Zamalek. And this area, the French decided to build a quarantine area for any people coming from epidemics. So this is what Napoleon Bonaparte wanted to do, but actually Napoleon Bonaparte has destroyed a lot of important buildings during the 2 revolts that happened by bombing Cairo and bombing the important sectors of Cairo in which the Egyptian revolutionary forces have taken cover and taken refuge. by blowing these areas, a lot of mosques and a lot of houses have been destroyed. So Napoleon didn't bring much of building or renovations or improvement in the structures of the city, but it was left for Muhammad Ali to make a complete reshuffle of the city. He decided to take up the citadel as his own premises. On his way to do this, in order to build his palace, of the famous Al-Qahira palace, and the other ladies' palace, he of course has destroyed a lot or most of the remnants of the Mamluks dynasties that were having their palaces, and the remnants of the palaces, whether these were during the Qaitbay or the Nasr Muhammad or the Ashraf Qaitbay. All these areas were unfortunately destroyed, being replaced by his beautiful mosque and his beautiful palace Al-Qahira, which unfortunately was burned in the early 70s of the 20th century. So Muhammad Ali started the renovation of the city. He started straightening up, widening the streets, removing the debris, and he did something which not a single sultan or a ruler did. Cairo as a city, as an old city, used to destroy or to lose its garbage on its western and on its eastern borders. And these areas, Muhammad Ali decided to clean up and to remove all these destruction and these dirts, and which were tons and tons of dirts that has been accumulated for hundreds of years. Muhammad Ali decided to clean up these areas and build beautiful gardens, and to drown or to destroy these small ponds and the small swamps that were around Cairo, and make all these areas inhabitable, and started planting them. And one of these areas is the beautiful Garden City, which was given the name Garden City by time because the number of trees that Muhammad Ali has planted in this area after cleaning it from the tons and tons of garbage and of destroyed debris that were accumulated through hundreds of years of Cairo. So Muhammad Ali's first step was to improve the city. In order to do the proper urbanization is by cleaning the streets, widening the streets, by sometimes, of course, some of the beautiful mosques of Cairo were victims of that, but in total there were a lot of innovations and urbanizations were made by Muhammad Ali for cleaning conditions, for hopefully for improving the sanitary condition of Cairo, and leading Cairo to become a real inhabitable modern city in the early 19th century. And of course, this was followed by his work of his grandson. And by the work of his grandson, we're going to talk after the break about Ismail Pasha. So finally we reach Muhammad Ali with his famous urbanization of Cairo, and of course the civilization and the civic work done by his famous son Ibrahim Pasha, who has undergone a lot of improvement in Egypt and improvement in Cairo, especially in, for example, naming the streets and giving number to buildings and trying to clean up the city. And after that, unfortunately, with the death of Ibrahim Pasha during the reign of his father, and then the death of his father and the governing of Abbas I, who did not much didn't do much improvement of Cairo, but he innovated, and he did the building of the Abbasiyya, which is after his name, the Abbas I, and made the old Za'afarana Palace, not the new one, which we are here now in Ain Shams University. And so to the north of Cairo, he started the urbanization of the desert with the Abbasiyya. However, Said didn't do much improvement in Cairo, and it was left to Ismail Pasha, who has done a great improvement in Egypt and in Cairo by the Europeanization of Cairo, the building and the great structuring building, and the new modern Cairo, or what we call the Khedive Cairo, which has undergone under President Sisi a lot of improvement in the last years to bring up the life to the buildings and the structuring that Ismail Pasha decided to make by the westernization of Cairo in the area of what we call the downtown Cairo. So Cairo is a great capital. It's a cosmopolitan capital. It's a capital of the old world, and yet it has been always expanding southwards, eastwards, and westwards, and northwards. And we can see now its eastward expansion into the new city, or the new capital of Egypt, which is going to be about 20 or 30 kilometers away from downtown old Cairo. And yet by time we'll feel that the new capital is also part of the old capital. So this was a sort of summarizing of Cairo and making a note and information that has been always there for years. For thousands of years, the region of the apex of the delta was the capital of Egypt. And Cairo, although it is a new city by the measure of Egypt, as it's only 1,050 years old, 52 years old, yet it still is part of the old city of Memphis. So this was the World of Info. My name is Amr MABROUK, Dr. Amr MABROUK. Dua Muhammad was at the control. Stay tuned with us in Radio Cairo, and hopefully we'll see you next week, the same time, the same station.